The purpose of our podcast, right, is to teaching entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business leaders how to use life's experiences for them. So today, I'm very honored to have a special guest, military man, served our country. So Donnie, welcome to the show.
He knocked on my door and he said, "Come with me." Brought me down to the SEAL base. I got that overwhelming sensation that I belonged there. It was the craziest thing ever. I'm getting the hair on my arms is sticking up right now.
You did land one of the most high-profile athletes in the NBA. You want to tell us who that was and what were some of his issues, how you fixed them?
LeBron had been suffering back pain for, I think, 6-7 years. He came to our gym in Miami. If you Google it, it'll come up and say, how LeBron James fixed his back.
Donnie, I want to thank you for your service and thanks for being on the House of Bricks. Good morning, everybody. Love to welcome you to the House of Bricks podcast, where we are teaching entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business leaders how to use life's experiences for them instead of carrying them with them and letting them slow them down. So today, I'm very honored to have a special guest. First of all, Mr. Raimon, thank you for your service. A very decorated military man, served our country, and has a great story. So Donnie, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You and I met about, I'm getting old. I think it was 15, 16 years ago, 2005. How many is that? 17, 18 years. I'm just doing math in my head real time here. When we met, you had just started your personal training business. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about you, your upbringing, and kind of, your story.
I was born in a town called Fitchburg, Massachusetts, about 45 minutes to an hour outside of Boston, and very, very heavy Canadian city. Played a lot of hockey growing up. Then after high school, went to college. Wasn't really feeling it that much. I was a computer science major. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I was working at a bar in Boston while I was in college. And the general manager got a big promotion, and he pulled me and a few other guys out to San Diego, and they were going to pay for our last year of school. While I was there, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. A friend of mine that was from Boston, he moved to San Diego the same time I did, and he was an Air Force Academy grad, and he transferred into the SEAL teams. And right after he got done the infamous Hell Week, he knocked on my door, and he said, "Come with me." He brought me down to the SEAL base, and I was like, "What did you bring me here for?" And he said, the whole time I was here, all I could think of was this would be perfect for Donnie.
Why would he say that? Did you have an edge to you? You're super disciplined. It's not the best recruiting message. Hey, come down to Hell Week. So what made him think you were a good fit?
I don't know. It was one of those things where while he was going through training, he just thought it fit. And a lot of people they think the SEAL teams are all a bunch of Dolph Lundgrens and everybody's 6'4", 225 pounds, no body fat. It's not. It's more triathletes, I think. It's endurance and then putting up with the cold water. And the whole Hell Week thing, it's not a physical torture. They exhaust you, and the goal is to see if you can still think when you're exhausted. That's the main goal.
Were you in shape at the time? Were you doing triathlons? What?
I was, actually.
Okay.
I was.
All right.
Yeah. So Fitchburg is the second hilliest city in the United States. So a lot of cyclists come from Fitchburg. So I used to do the Mount Washington Hill climb, 8 miles straight up. One year I qualified for the Pikes Peak race. So it's just not from training. It's just a really hilly city. So growing up, you ride up hills all the time.
Right.
You just get that endurance in your legs.
Okay. So you show up there. What happens next?
I'm a big skeptic of a lot of things.
Oh, I would never imagine that.
When I walked in there, I got deja vu. Like, I'm getting the hair on my arms is sticking up right now. I got that overwhelming sensation that I belonged there. It was the craziest thing ever because I don't believe in that stuff. We took a walk around for about 30 minutes, and then he introduced me to a recruiter. I signed up right there and then.
Right there. Did they shave your head on the spot?
No, I had to wait 9 months to go in. There was a recruiting delay.
So you're not really a big hype guy, but there are some Navy SEALs out there that have used their experience, so to speak, to write books and be popular on Instagram and YouTube. How much of that is reality and how much of that is just hype and marketing?
It's probably 50-50. In the community, you're supposed to be the silent warriors. You weren't supposed to tell people you're a SEAL. We used to lie all the time, like, oh, what do you do for a living? We used to lie about it. And, it was funny because we would wear civilian clothes on base. And like to the people that were in the military, like, well, they're the only guys allowed to wear civilian clothes on base. So everybody knew who you were anyway.
Right. Yeah.
So, it was always be silent, in the background. And nowadays, with social media and things like that, some people have written legit books and some people write some BS. So I'd say it's about 50-50 out there that people just are trying to make money. They feel like it's owed to them because they serve their country and they get out and there's no real job qualifications. When I went to college, I went back to college after I got out, and one of the professors told me, he goes, the only qualifications you are is to be an assassin. You got to go work for the mama. I was like, that's why I'm here.
Exactly.
So I want to learn some marketable skills.
Did you serve on any active missions that you can share, kind of maybe an intense situation that you were in or something you can share with our listeners?
We had quite a few. So there was being put in the engineering department because of my science education background. I worked on a special project. It was called a fast attack vehicle. It was if you Google it, you'll see it, either fast attack vehicle or it's called DPV, Desert Patrol Vehicle. They had some troubles with those because they were extremely maintenance intensive. Because what they did is they took some off-road race cars and they put a third seat on them and put a bunch of guns on them. So they were way heavier than a race car.
Right.
And then when you're driving in a desert, you're taking a finely tuned engine and you're shaking it for hours upon hours. So they need constant care. And they didn't have enough people to become like mechanics and do their warfighting, take care of the responsibilities at the same time. They put me on that project and I ended up working on it for about 13 years.
Wow. So when you say in the desert, were you in the Middle East somewhere or?
Yeah, so I was on SEAL team. The SEAL teams are split up by their geographic region. So like SEAL Team 1's not on a hierarchy of SEAL Team 2.
Okay.
They cover different geographical areas. I requested SEAL Team 3 specifically to work on those dune bugs. And SEAL Team 3 covered the Middle East.
Okay. So you spent some time in the Middle East.
A lot of time in Kuwait, Iraq. Okay. You can't stay a warfighter for too long. What they do is they'll pull you off and give you, it's called shore duty. So I went to become an instructor. They don't want you operating overseas for years upon years because that changes you and they want to keep it like, they're trying to maintain your mental health.
Okay. It's important you bring that up, like the mental health aspect. That's where I was going. So you've got like your combat fighters, right? And they're in combat, something breaks down, right? And your team's defenseless. Are you the guy that are like, hey, Donnie, get this thing working?
Yeah, actually, I got quite a bit of attention in Afghanistan for that very thing. So, also driving vehicles through that really fine dirt is not good for your vehicle either. And these are off-road race cars. They're not like, they don't have hoods and all the filters. One mission, we were on a target and I was the lead vehicle, and we're on night vision goggles and stuff like that. We pulled up on a target. There were two fast attack vehicles and then a couple of Humvees, and we were attacking a target. And when we pulled up on target, we moved the vehicle. The vehicles have a lot of guns, a lot of very large guns on them. So you kind of maneuver the vehicles where if anything hits the fan, the guys on the inside can be like, hey, game on, take everybody out, and we can destroy buildings.
Right.
So the second car pulled up behind me and the other driver were on the radios. He's like, hey, the car's not driving well. And I could hear it sputtering. And I knew I got built these cars with the manufacturers. So every nut, bolt, wire I had dealt with. So I knew them very well. And I could tell, I'm like, that's a clogged carburetor jet. So this is like 3 a.m. We're on target, actively fighting. I jumped out of the car, ran over, unscrewed the carburetor jet, pulled it out, sucked the dirt out of it, put it back in, car fired up immediately, and then I jumped back in and we continued on with the mission.
So for the people listening on audio, when you say suck the dirt out of it, did you actually literally suck the dirt out of it?
Yeah, so a carburetor jet, they're like this long and they're full of hose, and the gas flows through the end, and then it turns into a spray at the bottom. So that's what sprays into the cylinder and it creates like a fog of gas, and that's what ignites inside your thing. So inside this tube, a piece of dirt must have got in and got stuck where it sprays out. So I literally unscrewed it, put it in my mouth, and sucked the dirt out, and then spit it out onto the ground and screwed it back in the car worked.
Wow. That's unreal.
Yeah,
and
roared to life. So.
The purpose of our podcast, right, is to help people use life's experiences for them. It sounds like you've had a lot of positive experience in the military. You're a Navy SEAL. You were in service for 13 additional years after that. What brought you into the personal training business? And that sounds very minimal because you're way above a personal trainer. So just walk us through that transition, what motivated you to get into it, and some of the experience that you had being a Navy SEAL, being in those types of situations that helped you make that transition.
We spent 8 months in Afghanistan, came back here. They wanted to get some of us out. So there's a Navy parachute team. It's like a parachute demonstration team. They use it to recruit, because a lot of young kids out there that maybe think about being SEALs, that think we're all like superhero Dolph Lundgrens, they send us out there to meet kids and that you want to recruit for the SEAL teams, and let them know, like, hey, we're just normal people. They put me on the Navy parachute team, and one jump, my parachute, it didn't malfunction, but when you have a parachute like the G.I. Joes with the trash bag on top, and you throw it up in the air and it comes down, it goes whack, right? And then it like slows immediately. You can't have that when you're jumping from 25,000 feet. You're going 180 miles an hour. You can't have that thwack and stop. So there's a little thing on the bottom of the parachute that when you pack it up in there, it makes the parachute open. You decelerate slower, and it opens much more gentle, so you don't get injured.
Okay.
That mechanism of my parachute didn't work correctly, so I got the thwack. My head, like 180 miles an hour, slammed off my chest, and I strained some muscles in my neck. But what they thought it was just typical whiplash.
Right.
But that strains the muscles back here. So I was getting treated for that whiplash, and it wasn't working. And after about maybe 6 to 8 months of physical therapy and training, I was still on light duty, because they're like, you got to let that heal. And they were like, listen, we don't know what's going on here. We're going to have to do something. A friend of mine sent me to this clinic in San Diego. He said, hey, go check these guys out. They've had a little success, go check them out. So I went up there, paid my own money, and they found the problem right away. They did kind of a lower version of what we're doing now. We've expanded on it tremendously. And the founder of that clinic, he was trying to explain to me what was going on in my neck. And when I told him, I go, yeah, that's just a shear force, right? That's an engineering thing. I go, yeah, that's just a shear. He goes, how do you know that? And I said, oh, I'm in the military, and in addition to being a SEAL, I work in the engineering department. And he says to me, have you ever heard of biomechanics? No. He's like, you should look into it. So I didn't think anything of it at the time, but my neck problem got solved. I was back on duty. Then I was starting to get a little older. I think I was 37 at the time. Did some more missions, and I was about 12 weeks in with no shower, no hot food. I was dirty. And I was 37 years old, and I've been doing this for 13 years. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. So then it came to me like, oh, I want to do what that guy did. We have strength coaches in the SEAL team. Someone works us out every morning. We have our own orthopedic clinic. And I was like, I want to learn that. So when I came back, the Navy was like, hey, why don't you go? They're like, oh, yeah, you fix your neck. Go take all these classes and we'll pay for it. And then about a year later, after they paid for all these classes and courses for me to go to about that stuff, they like to bring it back to the community. The orthopedic clinic called me up, said, hey, we got a kid here who's in buds. He's a really good kid. His back hurts. Can can you come over here and do your thing? So I was like, sure. So I went over there and I had to do an evaluation on this guy in front of the whole orthopedic clinic. And apparently what I did worked, solved his back problem. They called me like, yep, he's back in training. Great job. And that made me feel really good inside.
Right.
And I was looking for something to do on the outside anyway. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. So when I got out, I opened up a little clinic. One of my last parachute jumps with the parachute team was for the Kansas City Chiefs. And Lamar Hunt was the owner back then. He was a military fan, huge fanboy of the military. So we did a jump in, and he was standing next to me before the game. And he started chatting me up. And he goes, so I heard you're getting out. What are you going to do? And I told him. And then he called over the head of marketing for the Chiefs and said, hey, do a demographic workup for the Chief here. He did. He told me I needed to either go to New York City or Miami Beach because they have the highest per capita spending on personal training.
Yeah, and that's where we met. I think it was 2005 when I moved down to Miami. So I got married in 2003. We bought 5 acres in Boca Raton. We were going to live in Boca. Drove through the neighborhood, had a midlife crisis at 24, and ended up buying a condo in South Beach in the Continuum. Amazing place, a who's who of South Beach. And I don't even remember how I got connected with you. I think it was maybe Vanessa that saw you first. I don't remember, but you were on Lincoln Road, right off Lincoln Road. Having lived in Miami, everyone down there has a personal trainer. They all think their personal trainer is the best. So you think about our listeners, whatever business they're in, there's always competition, but there are certain markets where it's going to be even more competitive. How did you differentiate yourself from all of the different types of personal training out there? How were you able to establish yourself?
That's where I put the SEAL thing to work. So people found out very quickly that I was a SEAL, and that kind of spread like wildfire. So I think a lot of people back then were interested in that. There was a very high-end gym there, and a few of the trainers found out where I did my training, found out I was a SEAL. So they came to me and brought me a lot of clients to solve the problems of their clients. So they wanted to start like a corrective exercise program, and I had been studying biomechanics, so they wanted to know what it was about. And so a lot of these trainers came to me and just wanted to talk. They were interested in it, and then they started bringing me their clients, and then I was doing the evaluation on their clients and then training them together, and then they would go back to the gym and start having. That's where I kind of got my foot in the door because I was having successes solving those people's problems. And the more I did, the more they kept bringing me. I think they ended up bringing me 300 plus clients.
Wow.
So that kind of worked. And so then they were going to start their own like corrective exercise program. And this gym was in the Four Seasons where the NBA teams stay. 7'2" NBA guy walked in with a bad knee, and he was like, hey, I heard you guys have a corrective exercise program. Who do I talk to? And I guess the trainer that they recommended, it kind of scared him because he's like, hey, this is an NBA guy. So the guy said, screw it, I'm bringing him to Donnie. And that's how I got my first NBA guy.
What do you see from your perspective? There's a gym on every corner. There's a million diet plans out there. I myself love to absolutely kill myself in the gym, at least until I met you. I remember going to work out with you and we'd be done. I'm like, is that it? You're like, yeah, you did everything you needed to do. And I got the most results I'd ever had before with probably, I don't want to say the least amount of effort, but it felt like the right effort. What do you see as the problem in, I don't want to say society today, but it's not from lack of working out. Gyms are packed. What are some of the things that you see as like the biggest problem? What are people doing wrong? Why aren't they getting results?
If you can free the body up, if you have restrictions, like say you have a restriction in your shoulder or in your knee or something like that, if you get your skeleton measured and your joints measured by a biomechanist and they say, hey, your shoulder's not working properly, that also means it might be tearing itself up and it might not be functioning efficiently either. So you'd be better off you bring your car in and it's running horribly. The first thing they do is tune it up before they diagnose anything. So they put it back the way it's supposed to be, and then they look for problems. And I view that as the same way. So there are people out there that they don't know how to use their body correctly. So they're not lifting and they're not using their body properly. And by properly, I mean, by the structure alone. Their shoulders misaligned or their head's crooked for some reason. And it's just hindering their performance. And then some people just like they think that you got to be collapsing on the floor in a puddle of sweat to get a good workout. And that's not untrue, because if you're mechanically sound, you can beat yourself to death in the gym like that. If you want to be a high endurance athlete, a high level endurance athlete, or even power lifter or Olympic lifter, you're going to need that. But if you do it biomechanically correct, it gets a little easier for you. So a lot of the athletes that I've worked with over the years, they do see the same thing. They're like, oh, are you sure we're doing enough? And then when they start the season, they have no pain. And then everything's so much easier for them. They're actually surprised. If you focus on the function of the human body first, because your shoulder joint looks like my shoulder joint. The basic architecture is the same. The tissue mechanics are the same. So when you make the mechanics better, the car's running smoothly. And then, if you want to become a race car or a truck, then you go that way.
So you mentioned you got your first NBA athlete. Once you had him and started to see some progress, did that lead to other NBA athletes? Because again, I know in Miami, probably like every major market, and in these with the pro athletes, right? Everyone's coming to them saying, oh, my financial advisor's the best. My trainer's the best. Oh, this guy will fix you. Go do this workout. Like, they're hearing that nonstop. And of course, NBA teams are going to hire the best of the best. They've got to have high performing athletes. They're typically coming from a top university, Duke, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, that are going to have the best trainers, doctors, physical therapists. Like, how were you able to get your first NBA athlete, which we talked about, but then did that lead to other pro athletes?
Yeah, they talk a lot because they say the same thing. They'll tell all their teammates, oh, I found the best guy.
Right.
And a lot of times a lot of people will switch and then they don't get the results. So it helped. You get that result, and then you get a teammate, and then you get the same result. Like, fixed his knee problem. Then we got another client in who had knee problems and shoulder problems, but some of them are skeptical. So what we ended up getting is a lot of the veterans. We weren't getting the young guys. We were getting guys that were banged up, because we solved this guy's knee problem. He goes and tells this whole team, hey, this guy solved my knee problem. Then they're talking, like, you got phone calls. Got a shout out from that guy's coach on ESPN, so that didn't hurt. But
you did?
I got one of his teammates soon after that who had knee and back problems.
Okay.
Solved both of those problems. So then it just started to grow from there, the word of mouth amongst them. But they always called each other to find out, like, hey, is this guy legit? Because by the time you're a veteran, you've tried 20 trainers, you've had 10 physical therapists, you've been on 4 or 5 teams already. So it took a long time to get known enough where you start getting random people coming in who you didn't get directly introduced to.
So I've seen it online, so I'm sure it's public information. You did land one of the most high profile athletes in the NBA. You want to tell us who that was and what were some of his issues, how you fixed them?
Yeah. So I can't tell you what the issues were, but
right.
I can't tell you what the causes were, but if you Google it, it'll come up and say, how LeBron James fixed his back. So I guess I didn't know this at the time, but LeBron had been suffering back pain for, I think, 6-7 years. On Google, you'll see, a decade. He came to our gym in Miami, and he was training with my partner, and they just stopped, and he said, hey, my back hurts. So my partner, how we ended up business partners, he was very big into jiu-jitsu. He had a herniated disc in his neck, and I had solved his herniated disc problem in his neck. So he always said, if I ever open up a gym, I'm going to partner up with Donnie. So that's how that whole thing sorted out. But so he just came to me. He goes, "Hey, you got to evaluate LeBron right now." I was like, "Yeah, okay." So I did. Found his problem, but then from the business side of everything, turned into a little bit of a disaster because now the medical staff from the team he was on had to be involved. Nike had to be involved. So, now from me seeing him one-on-one for just a day turned into about 25 different people with their hands on it. And there was a lot of pushback. They wanted to, Nike wanted to put their own people in there. Cleveland was like skeptical. And, I don't blame them because there's one of the things in professional sports, like you said, is everybody has a guy and everybody wants to interject their guy and then the team loses control over it. So you kind of understand why they push back. But so I didn't see him after that. All I did was the measurements and the evaluation. I didn't see him. And then that whole thing happened in the background. And I just got a call one day and they said, "Hey, LeBron's on his way to see you." And he's coming by himself, no managers, none of his staff. So he came in. We were about halfway through the program that I designed for him. And I was behind him at the time. And he just looked at me over his shoulder. He said, "You just released my back."
In the first session.
First session. He just looked behind me and goes, "You just released my back." So this was right before the season was supposed to start. This was late September, I think. He came in for about a week and he was very guarded. We didn't talk at all. So no feedback from him. That was the only feedback I ever got was that one day. First session, he's like, "You just released my back." And so I worked with him about a week and they left. They went back. He had to check in for training camp. I gave the staff, the program, I said, "Hey, if you guys, I think it's working. Keep doing. If he says it's working, keep doing this, and he'll be good to go." And they were like, "Yeah, no problem." So about 2 weeks went by, and then it hit ESPN that he had to have a shot in his back, and everybody freaked out. And I was like, "Well, whatever." I didn't think anything of it. Like, well, maybe it didn't work, or I mean, I'm just saying that I thought it worked. But, so then it was on the news. It was a disaster for 2-3 days on the news. And then I got a call from his people and they said, "Hey, can you come up here right away?" And
when you say up here, you ended up moving, right?
Well, not right away. I just went up to see what was going on. And so I went to Cleveland and just stayed at a hotel near his house. And, when I finally got to them, they wanted me, I had to sign all these non-disclosures and stuff like that. And they said, "Hey, I said, what am I doing here?" And they said, "Oh, he said what you did before was working. He wants to start back up and see if it gets better." So I did. And I worked with him a week. He still didn't say a word. Nobody said a word, like no feedback. I was back at my hotel. The car was supposed to pick me up. So I was coming back to Miami. And then, the person in charge of all his businesses came in and said, "Hey, can you stay for, till the end of the month?" Stayed till the end of the month. Same thing. I was about to leave, came back. She said, "Hey, can you stay for the next 3 months?" So I stayed for the next 3 months. And then at the end of that 3 months, I went to his house and his mother just asked him right in front of the whole group, "Hey, LeBron, how's your back?" And he goes, "I haven't thought about my back in about 2 weeks." And I was like, okay, so it was working.
It kills me because you're so nonchalant about everything. "Oh yeah, it was 3 a.m. I'm in the desert. I fixed this vehicle. We're in combat. Oh yeah, LeBron James comes in, no feedback." Is that just a natural mental toughness? You're not up and down? Is that something you developed in the military, being in those situations? Because I think about, again, our listeners in business, right? You go to a meeting, you meet with an investor. I've sold multiple businesses in the past, like going in and having that deal discussion. And then you're walking out of there thinking, did I say the right things? Did I do the right things? Like just all the mental tennis that people play. How are you able to stay so collected?
I wasn't.
Okay, good. Good.
It's exactly like you just said. I don't care who you are. Like when you're doing deals that can change your life, or you're doing things that can change your life, your mind's never at rest. You don't know if, in SEAL teams, if one mistake, you could be booted and that changes your life, or somebody could die. So you're always nervous. You're always on edge. And I think just over time, you get used to it. But like even I said, I still don't watch basketball because it's stressful. And I don't mean I get panic attacks or anything like that, but it's like, I ended up working for LeBron for 3 years straight. And, after those couple of months where he said he was finally pain free, and then I was watching games, like every time he landed the wrong way or took a bad step and he cringed or he got bumped by somebody, I would get nervous. Okay, this has just been declared publicly that I solved his back problem. And it's like, what if it comes back? I have 5 or 6 billionaire clients, and you get nervous when they come in because they're used to a certain level of customer service, and you want to make sure you provide that. But if you don't hang around with any of them, you don't really know. You learn that their cars are never dirty. They've never seen a speck of dust in their house, and their people kiss their butts all day, and they make important decisions. So when you get around those people and you see how normal they are, look at you out here doing your podcast. You've done big business deals. You've sold company. You've built up companies and sold them.
Right.
Now we're just having a conversation. I'm nowhere near that level financially I don't even know how I would do something like that. So, I know like you're just a guy who's had some significant accomplishments. So I don't think what you've done is any different than what I've done.
No, I appreciate that. And thank you. And that really is the purpose of this podcast. And the next phase of my life is taking all the mistakes and failures that I've made to inspire other people to make the most of their opportunity. Because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Get around the right people, the right coaches, the right leadership, CEOs, culture. So fast forwarding to where you are today. So you worked with LeBron James. I know a handful of other high profile athletes that you've worked with, but you were able to transition from being a personal trainer, just having your own shop, to now you're running a business, which a lot of entrepreneurs aren't able to make that transition. I call them solopreneurs. You start a business, you're gifted at a certain thing, but to really scale and grow it, which is what I'm helping entrepreneurs do now, is how do you take your gifting and scale and multiply to actually build enterprise value? So tell us about your current business and that transition that you're able to make.
Yeah, started with a little tiny 1,000 square foot place. What I quickly realized, and what I wanted to do the entire time, I just didn't have the platform, was start teaching the biomechanics, because people talk about it all the time, but they miss the bio. So because it's very, very biology intensive. So after I started having some successes, it was actually shocking me how successful the application of biomechanics was. So I decided to teach it. And my partner was a very successful, he's very charismatic, he's very business oriented. So when I paired up with him, everything he's strong at was pretty much everything that I needed to go into business. So that's why we partnered up together. So it worked out well there, where he provided that platform where I could start teaching. So we opened up a certification course, and of course everybody was like, oh, this is the same stuff that they did to like a LeBron and the other athletes. So let's go take that course. So the course exploded. The first one we did sold out in 4 minutes.
Is it online or in person, or?
No, it's in person, because it's quite intensive. It's very hands-on. It's not something you can just click on online and go through and get a certification.
Okay.
So, and then we started getting some gym owners who would come. The location we have in Miami, the biggest feedback we get is it feels different. There's a different vibe in there. Like the energy is different. So we've gotten a few gym owners that when they came to Miami, like, hey, we want to open up a DBC. So they've converted their gyms to our gyms. So we have one in NorCal and then one in San Diego as well. So now we have 3 locations. That was kind of easy because they were already gym owners. So we had to give them some tips on how to manage the gym and things like that. But Um, and I learned kind of the hard way about how to structure. We have 21 trainers, and when I had my first gym, I was just letting the trainers give me a little bit percentage of the money they made. So like that didn't work out structural wise. So now we charge the trainers rent. So we get a steady income, and it's cheaper. It's cheaper where we are, where they don't have to go rent their own spaces and open up their own gyms and do the managerial stuff. So, I don't really train that many people every day anymore. I'll see a few clients in Miami, but I travel too much. But now I have to do, the business owner stuff. It's like, you got to schedule the certifications. How much do you charge? What's the market doing? We're in a little bit of a pre-recession here. So trainers that don't make a lot of money can't really afford to come to Miami. The flights and the hotels are now more expensive than the certification course.
Right.
So you get these dips. And now, we just renovated a new building that's a lot bigger. And then the construction woes and the permitting. It wasn't a gym before, so you have to convert that. So I feel like I was a quick learner from that Rodney Dangerfield show, Back to School, where he goes back to business school and then finds out the hard way about the fire codes and things like that.
Right, right. One of the challenges in scaling a business, so you, again, obviously super smart, dedicated, into the details. When people scale a business, sometimes the product loses integrity, especially something as complicated as what you're doing. Every person's body is different and functions in a different way, could have different complications. Like, how are you able to maintain your integrity?
Our certification courses are hard. We've had medical doctors come through, chiropractors. I get a lot of engineers that come through the level 1 certification. So I think they think I'm maybe a high-ranking nerd that they want to learn from, because there's a lot of engineers out there that are making products for sports performance and things like that, but they're having a hard time getting their hands on the athletes. So they're not really getting good data. They're not getting good feedback. And, they focus a lot, like everybody wants to get their little product on an NBA team, but it's like, no, because if you only sell one to an NBA team, you sold one.
Right.
Who cares? You need to apply to the masses because you need to sell 1 million of these things. But they think that by getting the famous athlete or the celebrity that their business is going to explode, but it doesn't really work that way. So, you have to us, we don't care who it is. We just want to make people better functioning human beings. So yeah, we get some high profile athletes and celebrities, but we still work with the general population, probably more. So you can't put yourself in too narrow of a niche like that. You got to think about business wise too, because you've got people working for you now. You got to, that income has to be there. You have to grow.
Right. You think about in business, everyone wants to go land a Fortune 500 company as a client, or one of the recognizable logos to put on your website. But guess what? Everybody's going after them. So going after, the small to medium sized businesses can often be more stable. And like you said, it's a bigger pool to fish from. So just kind of wrapping up here, I wanted to talk about, again, just that transition that you made, from being a Navy SEAL. Like, what did you learn from that? Are there any best practices that you can share with our audience that, maybe the, general public may not know of, some disciplines that you used in growing and scaling your business that, if they didn't serve in the military, they wouldn't have those?
People have heard of Murphy's Laws, and there's some military Murphy's Laws, right? And so it's Murphy's Law. Mike Tyson used one. He said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So, and then one of our very popular business clients, he spoke at one of our courses, and he kind of emphasized the same thing. He said, "Hey, listen, stick to your plan, but be prepared to pivot." So in the SEAL teams, we used to do, we do a mission planning, and then we have what we call the murder board. So you would bring in people who don't really know the mission right off the bat, and then you walk them through it, and they're intentionally there, even antagonistically trying to murder your plan. So find things you didn't think of, like what could possibly go wrong, and then you make contingencies for that. So I think a lot of people, when I first came out, like, oh, you got to have a business plan, and you got to do this, and you got to do that, and people, it's kind of common out there. It's like, no, stick to your plan, stick to your plan. But I don't agree with that. I think you need to pivot. I wish I would have known how to pivot earlier, because you may have a strong conviction about what you think is going to happen with the business. Like I've met some trainers like, I only want to train athletes. I'm like, well, you're going to have to get some results with your regular clients before an athlete's going to trust you. Like, somebody comes to you and an athlete's like, oh, I got a bad knee. Okay, how many knees have you fixed before? They're going to want to know, and was this person an athlete? Like, you got to work your way into it. You got to pivot. So what you think may be the market, how much money you might think you need, or you don't think you need a partner, you don't think you need an advisor, you don't think you need a mentor. If you may not, but you should be prepared to every little obstacle you hit, like, okay, how do I get around this? Like, do I need help, or do I not need help? Or maybe I'm wrong. Admitting you're wrong is a big thing in the military. It happens freely. It's unbelievable. That was one of the first things, in the military versus civilian world. In the military, right away, people, like, they tell you that a military person will usually tell you that they screwed up before you find out. And it's a culture. So that's encouraged in the culture, because then it's like, okay, let's fix it now before it becomes a problem. And I think that's just one little culture. So I think if your plan's not working, you need to pivot quick, and you need to be honest with yourself. Like, hey, this isn't, like, I knew right away that when I was starting business, like, I didn't have the platform. I didn't know how to launch a certification course that was going to sell out in 4 minutes and do all these things. I knew I wanted to teach it, but I didn't know how to do it. And then when I met my partner, it was like, that's his thing. So it's one of those things like, hey, do I need a partner yet? Yeah, I don't think either one of us would be where we are now if we didn't have each other, because I think my strengths are his weaknesses, and my weaknesses are his strength. So it's great. It couldn't have worked out any better.
Yeah, and so that's a great place for us to close out here, because one of the things that I tell all entrepreneurs and business leaders is every decision gives you feedback. So whether it's right, wrong, you make that decision, be decisive, get the feedback, read, and then react and make more decisions, gives you that feedback faster. So, it's always good to have a business plan, have the blueprints, design the structure that you want. But like you said, be willing to adjust and pivot. But if you're not making decisions and pushing the business forward, you don't get that feedback. So everything looks good on paper. And then when you try to apply it and start moving things forward, so that gets the momentum, the progress. And look, I'm a college dropout. I started my first business out of my apartment, couple $100. Definitely didn't have any formal training, any business plan. I just had the commitment to succeed, the right mindset, made decisions, and the good ones I leaned into, and the ones that weren't the right decision, that gave me feedback to make more positive decisions. So Donnie, I want to thank you for being on the show. I know our listeners will be inspired by your story. Thank you again for your service, and thanks for being on the House of Bricks.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks, Donnie.